Hey, Nick. How's it going?
So today was a busy one for you guys, so let's handle that before we jump into the bigger questions. The latest replicator weapons batch, and I wonder if you have a hot take about the Defense Secretary nominee. Let's go with the replicator first. One, Altius and Ghost drones and the Barracuda for ETV. How much are you scaling up production for them? What feedback have you heard from users? And is the onus on you or the government to store these thousands of attritable weapons, basically?
Yeah, so with Replicator, I mean, we're a huge fan of the program and the ideas behind it, which is, in our head, it's about how do we get the department just move faster, within a year, really, right? Like, they've really started this quite quickly. And Secretary Hicks did a great job of, actually moving this forward, busting through all the hurdles. There isn't, a 5-year research program to figure out exactly what they need. They assess what worked, are scaling it, and moving out. So we're extremely excited about that. And a lot of it was based off of, kind of user feedback and what's actually working. So with the Ghost drone, for example, that was, a competition with the Army. There was soldier touch points, trials, nonstop feedback, what's actually going to work. Taking a lot of the requirements were driven by changes, you see in Ukraine. So it was a very, very good way to actually acquire capabilities that work. In terms of scaling it, this is what we've been prepared to do. We know, next year we're going to have to, I think, 250% increase in production across the board for all the different systems we have, which is awesome. We're really excited about it. And,
what's driving that 250%?
Oh man, so we've seen things across the capabilities you mentioned, the LTS drone for ordering munitions, both U.S. and international purchases. We're seeing a lot on our Roadrunner counter-air missile. So there's a lot of funding there through kind of supplemental and responding to the issues going on in the Middle East. So we've been seeing it kind of across the board on a number of different capabilities.
And gut reaction to Pete Hegseth. If he gets confirmed, you're going to have to work with him, right?
Yeah, look, I think our view is Trump is a change candidate, and this is an unconventional choice. And we're down to see what he's going to do. I'm excited to see just something different, some change. And we tend to do pretty well when there's a lot of turnover and a lot of change in the department.
Let's switch gears. Anduril earlier this year announced Arsenal 1, its TBD mega factory, where you're planning to pump out hundreds of thousands of arms, basically. Where do you want to build in the US, and where overseas are you eyeing for maybe 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, so we've been running a process for about, I would say about 9 months now. And when we're looking at this, it's a question of our concept with this is we know that, the exact mix of what we're going to make, which weapons, which aircraft, which ships, that's going to change. But we know that we're going to have to be flexible. We're going to have a lot of need for square footage, and we're going to need a very flexible workforce and factory to do it. So our concept with this is just a massive footprint, right? 5 million plus square feet over the next 10, 15 years to be able to scale into this very, very quickly. The process we look at is pretty straightforward, right? We're where's the labor, where are the sites, and which state governments really want to work with us that are excited about putting in all the things you need around housing, jobs, all of this to make it really go. So we're getting down to the wire in terms of selection, and I'm not going to tell you where.
Okay. Any truth to Arizona, Ohio, and Texas has been reported?
As our person commented, that is an inaccurate list.
Okay. Well, to the audience, if you see any site plans in your city council documents, send them my way. I would love to see them.
Yeah, your Proton Mail account is available.
Yeah. But it's cdemarest@protonmail.com. You can tweet it at me too. So when we launched the defense newsletter, you told me the U.S. military is, quote, addicted, end quote, to high-end, super expensive weapons and projects. What comes to mind, past, present, and future? And then I imagine you're trying to break the Pentagon of that bad habit.
Yeah, so, when you look at what can I get for, a single DDG versus the number of unmanned surface capabilities, or a single Virginia class compared to the, probably hundreds of autonomous underwater drones you can get for the same dollar. It's not like we think it's a one-to-one trade-off, but the need for just increased mass, and I think if we're seeing anything, in Ukraine and everywhere else, just the sheer volume of systems that are being consumed, the number of munitions, the number of weapons, the number of things that are being attrited is through the roof, right? So we know we need to increase the mass on these things. So I don't think this is an either or, right? I think, I was very excited that Secretary Kendall is re-looking at, kind of the NGAD requirements. To me, the idea of a $250, $300 million fighter jet is the peak of absurdity. Like, I just don't know how we could have plausibly afford that. And I'm very excited they're re-looking at, like, is this affordable and is this correct for us at this point? So, I think we're seeing a lot of signs of change in this, but the reality will come in when, like, the dollars actually start flowing to this. So, I think there was a lot of leadership from the congressional side of putting nearly $1 billion to work against the types of capabilities that you see in Replicator and a lot of these commercial higher mass capabilities. But the reality is we're talking like 0.1% of the defense budget was allocated to that, right? Like, that is absurdly low. So we need to be seeing, like, is 1% too low? Is 2%? Like, these numbers are not crazy to start driving up the amount of mass and production capacity we would need to sustain any conflict.
So in September, I believe, a few reporters, including myself, went down to the Anduril, Texas test site to basically watch drones collaborate and take down an enemy aircraft. It was simulated. The missiles were magic, so to speak, but we saw it play out. That brings to mind, two things: the power of software and the maturity of unmanned tech. We have a video that's relevant to it. I don't think it is Texas, but if we want to take a look and maybe you can tell us what's up.
Sounds great. See if it comes up.
Oh, look at that.
All right, very cool. So
it's snowing, so it's not Texas.
Yeah, probably not. So the basic idea when we think about autonomy is when you think about how most drones are controlled today, this is a pilot flying it, sitting in a Connex somewhere in Nevada, right? And that is not going to scale. So what we've really focused on is how do we think about having a team of drones that you can task like you would a co-pilot, right? Like, this is the idea with these sort of loyal wingman aircraft, is I want to go and task it to go out and be able to sanitize, an area, to be able to find adversary aircraft, and then I can choose when and how to engage them, and the aircraft will take care of it from there. So that's a lot of what you're seeing here, is really this idea of how do we do it. And we're able to drive testing very, very quickly by having surrogate airplanes, simulating out where we need to, so that we can get thousands of test reps before we get on to the real aircraft.
And that's what Hyperion is, correct? What we're seeing.
Like, basically our test campaign internally, we call it Hyperion. We're able to show a bunch of different journalists, folks in the government, things like that, what we've been working on, and we've made a ton of progress on this to date.
Yeah. So Anduril hit a $14 billion valuation a few months ago as well. That's almost $2 billion per year of company existence, something like that. Math was never my strong suit, so don't hold that against me. But what's the next big number or goal? And what does a dollar figure like that mean for defense in the broader market? That's a serious ka-ching.
Yeah. So I mean, it was we fundraise periodically. We've been able to use that venture capital to actually fuel the growth that we're seeing, right? So this is driving dollars into R&D to build the capabilities we think need to exist, as well as investing ahead of demand on these production capacities, the production facilities. From those capability questions, like, for us, this boils down to, like, a pretty simple equation, right? Like, we are looking for some problem with urgency. Like, the cost of not fixing it and taking time just to, like, kind of go through the typical process is much worse than actually just running through the brick walls necessary to fix these problems quickly. And with that, you need a government partner that's actually willing to lean in and think about different models and ways of actually operating. And so we've just been very successful in finding those problems, working with those customers where that urgency is paramount, where that schedule really matters, and they want to drive things in a different way. So for us, that's really what we're looking for. And we've really been expanding across all domains, finding pull basically everywhere we're looking right now, and folks just looking for different approaches of how to actually solve these problems.
So you mentioned customers, so let's jump on that. You've made some sales to Taiwan, I believe. You're obviously watching Israel, Hamas, Russia, Ukraine. What are you learning from all those different theaters, all those different fights, and how might that influence what you then sell to the DoD or another government?
Yeah, well, I learned that selling weapons to Taiwan is a pretty efficient way to get personally sanctioned. Yeah. That was pretty awesome. That was cool. So, as we're looking internationally, I think we're seeing two big trends right now. So, in a lot of the active theaters, the pace that war is changing, like the pace of these capabilities are getting, sort of irrelevant. Like in Ukraine, they're like kind of quoting the duration any given like communication waveform or drone will work in like weeks, right? The U.S. apparatus is in no way tooled to respond to that type of change, that pace of change. And so there's something that has to be like just radically different about how you think about sort of the software-defined nature, how we iterate on these things, how we get these capabilities out. And then I think the other thing we've been seeing internationally is a reflection of what's come out of Ukraine, and I'm sure Dr. LaPlante will speak to this as well shortly, which is production really matters, and the backlogs on a lot of these systems are scaring our allies.
That's the first question I plan
It is a scary thing, right? And I hear this everywhere we go, which is, if I place an order into the US system, will I get it in 5 years? Kind of unclear. And that is causing them to seriously look at what they need to invest in their sovereign capabilities and how they can do more co-production, have more control over their destiny. And that's something we're leaning into. We've been very successful in Australia. We're looking at this in a number of other countries where they're kind of looking at what are different ideas and ways to reinvigorate their industrial base and have a bit more control over this.
2 wrap-up questions real quick. You're doing autonomy, drones, WISP, missiles, rocket motors, et cetera. What's next?
Man, so there's so many crazy ideas I talked about today, but
Just throw one out there.
So we're doing a lot in space. I think that's an area that we're very, very excited to move into. There's a lot of really cool on-orbit stuff that, unfortunately, I can't tell you anything about. It's really cool, though. But
that was a cop-out.
Yeah, it was a cop-out. Sorry, but there's basically we're seeing this across the board. CCA is a great vanguard for the types of autonomous platforms and the lower price point you can drive to get mass back up. We're starting to see demand across all the services for similar types of capabilities. And then we're seeing a ton of demand on the weapons front as well for how can we produce these in novel ways and get scale out there.
Okay, last question before I get the hook. True or false, Anduril is the Theranos of defense?
Ooh, I have a large collection of black turtlenecks, so...
Well, who would that make you too in that equation, right?
Look, I view these things as if the best insult people can come up with is the government is so incompetent as to be defrauded by us, okay, that's kind of weird to insult your customers that way.
Fair enough. We'll have to leave it there, though. So, Brian, thank you for joining me up here, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it, man.